I sat down with Christoph Nakazawa, the creator of Athena Crisis. This game is not just an Advance Wars clone.
I saw this feedback where it's like, okay, I cannot beat like the third campaign level, the fourth level or something. I'm an expert in like Advance Wars, why is this game so hard?
This is possibly the future of gaming. I'm not kidding.
But also it's under a permissive license. It's the MIT license. So they can actually take that code and make their own turn-based tactical game and, put it on Steam or wherever they like.
Christoph Nakazawa designed Athena Crisis to have everything gamers have been asking for the past 3 years.
I'm not just here to like build a game. I'm here to like build a community. You can also buy Athena Crisis once and then play it on any device, right? So you can go on Steam or go on a website, you buy the game, you play on desktop, you can pick up the same campaign game on your phone or on your Steam Deck, wherever you are, and then you can go back and like continue playing on like desktop.
From giving gamers ownership of their games, something that other companies have been trying to take away.
Some people then are worried, oh, what if the game server goes offline or something? What are we going to do, right? And the offline version will still work perfectly, but if the game is open source, that means it's like immortal. Athena Crisis will still be a game that exists 100 years from now, right? So in that way, I really care about archiving like video games and like being able to provide it to future generations, right?
To making changes on an almost daily basis. I've seen you make patch notes 3 times in a day at one point. Like you updated the game 3 times in a day. How do you do that? Based on real community feedback.
I think for matchmaking, I would like somebody to just succinctly describe, hey, here's exactly how this should work in Athena Crisis. And then, I'm pretty sure we can get it in very quickly. For replays, I feel like we can do better than any other system. So, the reason it's taking a bit longer is because I'm still ironing out, like, what's the ideal system here?
Here's everything you'd ever want to know about Athena Crisis, and the man behind it who just might be the future hero of modern gaming. An Advance Wars clone with dinosaurs, dragons, octopus, zombies, flamethrowers, snipers, bears with bazookas. I'm talking to the creator of this madness, Christoph Nakazawa, who is the developer and maker and the person on the patch notes that I'm seeing output every day. I don't know how you keep up with that. The maker of Athena Crisis. Christoph, thanks for joining me for this interview.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. I'm excited to be here. So obviously you started off saying that it's inspired by Advance Wars, right? I've been playing Advance Wars since it came out in like 2002 or something back in Europe. I was like 12 years old or something. And I've loved the game ever since, right? And so I've played every iteration, including Reboot Camp. In 2007, 2008, like in high school, we had to do like a school project, and everybody did like, whatever project you do in high school, and I thought I want to go and build like a video game. And at the time, that's how I got into coding. So I built like a bunch of like smaller games, and I thought, okay, what is like a game I can bring like to the web, where people can play against each other and like build a community. And so I thought Advance Wars was like one that seemed achievable, to build like a PvP version of Advance Wars, right? And at the time, Advance Wars by web actually existed already. So I did know about it. I didn't really play it much, but I did know. And so I tried as a teenager to build a similar game like that. And there's actually references in Athena Crisis to that game that obviously only a few hundred people from Austria and like Germany know, that have played that original game, like 17, 18 years ago. So really far back. But I've always just really liked the idea of like building a tactical turn-based game. And then when I was about to like quit my job, I was like, okay, I want to get into the gaming industry, and I want to like take that game that I built as a teenager, but actually make it really good. Like at the time, it didn't have animations, it didn't have sounds even, it didn't have great pixel art, it didn't have single player, and like it just didn't have as many features as like Athena Crisis has. And at the same time, I also didn't know how to build any of them. That's why the original game didn't have that. And so one reason why I wanted to build Athena Crisis is to just kind of bring all my ideas that I have for this genre, evolve it, and then add a bunch of like fun stuff like invasions into it, so that it's really something new because there's so many games that are actually Advance Wars clones, and they're like, okay, yeah, this is exactly the same game, right? And I think Athena Crisis is this game where on surface you're like, okay, this is like just a regular Advance Wars clone, but then as you get deeper into it, you're like, okay, there's actually way more content. There's like way more editing tools. There's invasions. There's like a lot of depth to the game. And then just coming back to this comparison with Elden Ring is that, like there's this thing in gaming where I feel like when I started gaming when I was a kid, like in the 90s, the game didn't tell you anything. It's you start Super Mario Brothers and like it doesn't say, oh, press this button to jump, do this, do that. You like literally just stand there, and then the Goomba comes at you, and if you don't figure out how to jump, you'll just die, right? And so there wasn't like this tutorial that walked you through everything. And I feel like nowadays games have become this thing where you just like click buttons for like 10 hours, 20 hours, and then you get to the end, and then you see the credits, and then all you did is you just followed the instructions that you were given the whole time. And I don't feel like that is a rewarding and meaningful experience. So one of the design goals of Athena Crisis was to actually make it hard and not give you too much to tell you here's what you have to do. So you actually have to spend the time to figure it out. And like obviously that is something that a lot of people don't appreciate, especially nowadays. There's a reason why games tend to be easier nowadays. But I like to just let people go in, force them to actually think about what they're doing and like get better. And like there were all these people that were on streams like playing Athena Crisis, and they like lose on a map once, they get kind of angry, lose on a map a second time, and then on the third time they actually win, and you see them like jump up in their chair and like cheering and being like, oh my god, I did it, I learned something, right? And so at the core of Athena Crisis, that's like I wanted people to have some emotions and feel like there's a meaningful experience. So that's like the whole story of how we got to this game existing and like what it is.
Right, nice. So, with a game that's inherently harder and deliberately less, I don't know if I want to say less accessible, but you have to kind of figure it out a little bit more.
Mhm.
Who is your target audience? Like, what kind of gamer do you think would really enjoy this?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who has played games like this before ideally should enjoy it, right? I think that there's this whole thing where if you look at reviews, everyone who has really given Athena Crisis a serious look, they tend to enjoy it a lot. And people that spend like less than an hour, they might be like, this is, not fun, or maybe not for me. So I do think that actually the game could improve a lot on that angle to make it a bit easier, right? Like right now, I do feel like it's a bit too hard to get started for some folks, even though, the thing is also there's a tutorial, and if you read everything, you pay attention, then you'll actually figure it out, right? If you go the actual path that the game lays out for you, you do have to think, but like it's there, and you should be able to like figure it out. But what I've learned is like a lot of people just don't read any of that, right? Like there were people that are like, I cannot beat like the third tutorial like level, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm making adjustments, when I was still building the tutorial, and I'm like, okay, here's one thing maybe you would miss. But then what I realized at the end is like, I asked them, and I'm like, hey, did you follow the instructions that was in the dialogue? And they're like, oh no, I never read any dialogue. And then it's like, okay, it's very hard to like teach people a game when they're not willing to think and also not willing to read the instructions, right? So I do think the game could be a lot better to like give you an idea of like, hey, here's like how you get into it. And I think that's something where I'm trying to continuously improve. But in general, if you're just interested in something that like feels like, okay, you can sink a lot of time in, there's a lot of complexity that like reveals itself over time. And if you've played like Advance Wars or Wargroove or any of those kind of games before, you'll likely also enjoy Athena Crisis, and it will likely be harder than those games. And like that's one reason why that's intentional, is because if you have played Advance Wars and you go back into any of those campaigns, they're like very easy, right? Like you figure out one strategy, you'll never lose. But then, as said, I want Athena Crisis to be meaningful. So you have to think about, how you move your units, what units you produce, where you move them, like which units you protect, which strategy you use at each map. And that's why the main campaign is also really like different in terms of like the types of maps, the types of challenges that it exposes, so that if you're already an expert in all those other games, you go into Athena Crisis and it's not just another one of those games where you just like beat the campaign and you don't even think about anything once. You actually have to go back and it's like, okay, what are the best units to build here? What are the counters? Like how do you actually get to the end?
Right. Yeah, that was one thing I really noticed and I enjoyed about it. There was a couple of levels in the beginning where I was still learning the different units, and I didn't know, for example, that, okay, flamethrowers are great against soldiers. And so I would play through the level and get wrecked. And I was like, wow, I got one shot by that flamethrower a lot. Let me build that. Okay, now I can one shot their units. Let me build like 2 of these and back it up with a sniper. Oh wow, that level that just destroyed me, I just ran through it and I got all the stars. Like, whoa, that felt really good. So I think that like some of the levels definitely achieve that.
Yeah, no, that's and that's like really hard to balance, right? And so, and you need to also people have to have the right mindset when they're playing, right? And that's the thing where it's like you go in and it's like, I'm just gonna press buttons, whatever, I'm always gonna just win. This is like an easy game. Then you're gonna lose every time and you probably get frustrated, right? So the question that I'm often asking is like, how do we make sure these people feel like they're having good experience? But then you might go in and it's like, I saw this feedback where it's like, okay, I cannot beat like the 3rd campaign level, the 4th level or something. And then, they're like, I'm an expert in like advanced wars, why is this game so hard, And then I look into it and it's like, they actually like, this is the first experience they have with the game. They've played for like 30 minutes and they just chose to play on hard mode. Right. And so it's like, yeah, of course, if you're not learning the units, you kind of have to like unlearn some of the things you know about games in the same genre to really like be able to take in like, okay, yeah, for example, what you said, the flamethrower is strong against all other soldiers. And so if you're not, if you assume you just know how to play these games, then you might not have like a great experience. But if you're like open to like learning something new, and similarly, like I thought, okay, what's a good way to mix up the formula, and like I like Wargroove a lot. Like I really like, especially the art is like super beautiful. Like I'm still like jealous of how great it looks. But I also like how they brought like some of these fantasy units like dragons and some of that into the game. And so I wanted to like add some of those sort of units into like Athena Crisis to just make it like fun, where it's like, this is not just like a war game. And I actually don't want it to be considered a war game. I see it much more as like a game like chess, right? And so I'm just trying to find ways on each angle of like, how can we provide an experience that is like, it's challenging, but also like we mix it up with like a bunch of fun elements on a way that haven't been part of this genre before, maybe.
So my favorite of all the new units, like my number one favorite unit has to be the zombie. What
Yeah.
possessed you to put that infuriating, wonderful demon into the game?
Yeah, this is also so interesting. This is where I learned a lot about level design. The first zombie map actually has the lowest win rate of all of the 40 official campaign maps. So it's the one where people lose the most often, right? But not a single person has complained about that map. But there's other maps where it's like, oh, this is really frustrating. I cannot, and they might actually have a 0.5 or like 50%, 60% win rate or something like that. But then the zombie map has like a 20% win rate or something. And it's so interesting because I feel like it's such a novel concept and like it's just so fun that like people are like, okay, I'm actually really enjoying like this map, even if I'm losing, right? And so the idea is all of the maps should be that way. And so I failed on some maps to not give people that sense of like, okay, this is really fun, even if I'm losing. But then if we're looking at zombies, in Advanced Wars Dual Strike, there's this unit called Uzium, and it's not really based on that, but like that unit is kind of just annoying because like you have to always put 4 units to the side and then attack it and make sure that it like gets defeated, because otherwise it will like destroy one of your units. And so with the zombie, when I got into like, what are all the special units we could make, and then thought about what could be their like special abilities. For the zombie, it was like, okay, actually it's best if you just convert into a zombie. But then it doesn't make sense to convert like a tank into a zombie or something. So I thought, okay, what if it just converts units, right? And it's totally broken. I played an invasion once where I got to take over like a zombie faction, and then you can just like walk through, and because it's so broken for like PvP. And at the same time, it's just like so fun because you really need to completely change how you're playing the game. Like you get to this mission and up until this is like, okay, I'm just, here are some objectives, or, I'm just trying to defeat my opponent. But then you go on this map, it has fog, and if you're not careful, you're just going to lose your army. And even if it looks like really good, they could like come out and like convert like 5 or 6 of your units in one turn. And so that just, that is one of my favorite maps and like one of my favorite units as well. So it's just, spending months, sometimes years, trying to think of new ideas and new concepts that you can bring in. And then if you sprinkle them with like just the right amount into the campaign or into the game, then ideally it works well. And for this unit, it worked really well.
I think the reason that I liked that level, even though it was one of the most infuriating levels, was because it really feels like you're playing against a zombie invasion. Like, I don't know what you did, but every moment of playing through the Awakening, it's the one level I know by name, Awakening. Everything you do feels like you're legitimately trying to march your army into a zombie infested woods. Like you want to check ahead, and if you see a zombie, you're like, "Oh crap, no, stay away from that thing. Take it out from range. We can't get near that." And then you advance just a little bit too far, and just one or two zombies catch your army, and then your vision starts going dark as you lose because they've converted your recon. You can't see. The fog of war takes over. You're like, oh crap, how many zombies are there? Plus my own dudes I have to fight now. It's so good. It really hits the genre right on the
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's so interesting. In some way, I've played Athena Crisis more than anyone, but I have this weird tunnel vision where I'll spend like 3 hours just playing one map to play test it, and then moving on, or just jumping around. Like I actually have never managed to play the whole campaign from beginning to end. I'm like, playing on, like, I have my local version of Athena Crisis, but like on the online version, I'm still playing when I have time to get through it, and like trying to play with invasions as well. But there's this weird thing where it's like really hard sometimes to know about like balancing, because I have this like, okay, I played all these maps so much, I know exactly kind of how these things work. And then when I was working on Awakening, I thought, okay, this map is like, at first it was like super hard, and then I got it to a state where I'm like, okay, this is pretty easy. But then, I replayed it like 2 months later, and I lost 4 times. I was just like way too aggressive, and like it was just way too hard to beat. I'm like, oh my god! But I still had lots of fun. And then the thing is, like, even for me, even though I made the game, I kind of forgot where the zombies were positioned. All the stuff that I remembered from playtesting was kind of gone. But then, so I could like play with a fresh mind. And it was so much fun because I actually had to stop and be like, okay, I know everything about Athena Crisis, but I have to stop and actually think about how I'm going to approach this map. And I cannot just like ride into battle and like see whatever happens. And then the other interesting dynamic about the zombies, I guess, is that you learn to, you build units, they get converted to zombies, and then you need to build counters for those units that you built. And then if they get converted, you have to build counters for that again. So it like really changes completely like how you play any other map. So I really enjoy that too.
So you've been making patch notes since the game came out on almost a daily basis. Like I've seen you make patch notes 3 times in a day at one point. Like you updated the game 3 times in a day. How do you do that? First of all, how do you make updates to your game 3 times a day? How are you keeping up with this crazy patch note schedule? I mean, Athena Crisis is basically a different game than it was on release, and release was 3 weeks ago. Explain your madness. How do you do this?
Yeah. So just backing up, like I spent almost all of my career working on the web. I worked at Facebook and at Stripe as an engineer and an engineering manager. And Facebook used to have this value. It was called move fast and break things. And then I spent 10 years there, and like towards the end, or the latter half of that, that kind of phased out into like move fast with stable infrastructure. But the idea was basically you just you work at Facebook, you write code, you like push it, and it goes out like once a day. At first we had like we pushed facebook.com once a week, but then we went to this model of continuous push, where anytime you make a change, it goes live to like a few billion people within like 3 hours or something. And so when I switched to like the games industry, I thought, what are some of the things that I have done in my past that I could bring to game development to improve game development, right? And obviously there's some things in Athena Crisis that like are worse than like regular games. I'm like totally aware of that. But like for a game like Athena Crisis that is so requires such intricate balancing and requires a community, I just wanted to build a system where I can crank out features insanely quickly. So in my local development, sometimes it takes me like 2 or 3 minutes to like make a change, right? Like we had a bug this morning, and like as soon as I knew what it was, it took like 3 minutes, and then the change was live in the game. And so I just want to make sure that we can improve the game iteratively every day, ideally to get to a game that is actually great. and that is really well balanced, that works well for PvP, that we can also try different like balancing where people are like, hey, this thing might be broken in PvP, and then people come up with ideas, and I'm like, okay, let's try this one, right? And then people get used to that version, and then they're like, oh, actually, you know, that's maybe not great. Let's revert it or let's change it to that. So I just wanted to build a system that like where you can like build features that fast, or like iterate that quickly. And so locally, when I'm typing, I actually say autosave in my editor. So, you know, like that's the thing that's so weird about programming, is that all the tools that programmers have built, they autosave nowadays. You know, you write in a Google Doc or whatever, you know, you never go and like save your file or something, but developers somehow still like write code and then they hit save and then they go and like test it. They might have to compile it. But the way Athena Crisis works is that I'm typing, and as I'm typing, it immediately saves the file like within like 30 milliseconds. And then it actually reflects that change in the game, that, you know, in my local version of the game, not in the production version. So I can incredibly quickly iterate on stuff. And like the way that the system is built, I can build features like very quickly as well. And I try to always listen to the community, especially new folks that have great ideas, and like see, hey, if this is something I can build, you know, in like half an hour, an hour, I'll just go and build it because it seems like a really great idea, and it will probably make that person happy, and they'll keep playing. And then the second angle of like not just developing quickly, but also shipping quickly, is that the game can be deployed to everyone within like 3 minutes, right? And so I think that the one thing where I feel a bit bad is that sometimes there are bugs, you know, and like you have been finding a lot of them. So I apologize when like some things are like kind of worse. But then as like today, we just had this issue where there were a bunch of new invasions features, and then one feature wasn't interacting well with another, and then it allowed you to invade and immediately overtake the turn. So you didn't wait out your turn until the next, you didn't have to wait out until the original player had another turn. And, you know, the way it was designed originally was that, you know, okay, somebody invades, it should give the person that's like playing a bit of time to prepare for that. But the very first version actually was exactly like that bug today. So now we got a couple of hours of people unfortunately having to play like a slightly buggy version, but they were able to test this version that was the original intent of invasions and realized, okay, this is actually not how people would want it anyway. So I'm glad that that design decision actually made sense early on, and now I have like the data, because before it was just like, I think this is probably better. And we never really got to try this version. So yeah, there's some issues sometimes, sometimes bugs where maybe we're moving a bit too fast, but basically every issue only happens once. We have tests. We try to make sure that things don't break continuously. But yeah, all I'm saying is we can move fast. We build a lot of new features. We fix a lot of bugs, but sometimes there's also like new bugs, and we try to fix them insanely quickly as well.
Let's move on to PvP. I've saved this for the end because I know that this is most of what people will watch this video for. Literally, when I asked in the AWBW community what I should ask you on this interview, the first response, which was overwhelmingly received, was 3 words, and it basically amounted to the competitive scene, PvP. Like that's it. That's what everyone wanted to know. So, right, in order to have a competitive scene, and this is something that Wargroove struggled with a bit. There are a few features that are considered standard for a tactics game. You need a queuing system. You need a replay system. You need some kind of ladder with ELO and ranking and a way for players to see where they stand. You need some sort of tournament cycle. And you need a player base. And presumably a game balanced for PvP and some kind of map rotation. That's a lot of stuff. And I know Athena Crisis doesn't have all of these things right now.
Well, it does have some of these, yeah. It has some of those, but it doesn't have all of them, right? You know, the leaderboard, it's not elo based because elo has like certain problems. It's using true skill, but like we do have ranked games, right? And like we do record the rankings. We're still really early in the cycle of this game, right? And so the way I look at it is that I'm not just here to like build a game. I'm here to like build a community. That's how I've built everything in the past as well, when I was working at Facebook and like when I was working in open source. And you know, the Discord is like extremely active. Like it's at the point where I am having a hard time keeping up. So I think that means it's like pretty active. we're getting there on balancing. I think there's still a lot of things that should be improved. And whenever people are giving feedback, we're moving really quickly to change the balancing for something within the same day or the next day. We're also trying to be considerate. But like for me, the way I look at it is that I want this game to be great in PvP. I want it to be well balanced. I want people to like it, but it doesn't mean that I want to make all of the decisions to get to that point, right? So I'm usually in those balancing discussions trying to just encourage the discussion, encourage the conversation, focus it on getting to a specific outcome, and trying to raise all the considerations, all the things we need to figure out to make sure we can make a certain balancing change. And then once I feel like we got to a good agreement where I feel like this might be a good change, then we just put it in, right? So the balancing is there, the leaderboard is there, the player base, that's just something that I'm hoping will grow over time, right? As you mentioned, sometimes there's 3 updates in a day. There's even so I think so the launch was a few weeks ago, and now there's 7 or 8 more skills in the game. There's costumes, there's all this new content, right? And hopefully we'll also be able to explore more single player campaigns in the future as well. So the game keeps getting more content. I think you've already played more than 100 hours, right? So I think this game can definitely keep you busy for 100 hours already if you like. And as we keep evolving it, there will be more time that people can spend in it. And then the 2 other things you mentioned, I think one was the matchmaking, right? And then replays, right? And so replays is in the works, but no timeline yet. I'm hoping that it will ship soonish. And matchmaking, that's mostly just a consideration on what is the player base like, and what should the feature look like. So people who know exactly what that could be, and what they think would be the ideal system for Athena Crisis, if they could help iron out hey, here are the details, here's exactly what that should look like, I'm pretty sure we can get something like that working within a day or two.
So, this is both an interview question and an actual suggestion. Have you seen the AWBW community? I don't know if I can even call it a website. The interface, have you seen how their queue works, how their replays work, how streamers and YouTubers will take the replays of games and show them and go through them? Because honestly, I think it's a perfect example. Wargroove didn't do this well.
Yeah.
Wargroove kind of the PvP scene only existed through extraordinary effort by volunteers, uh, and it struggled because of that. There were a lot of people who felt they couldn't participate because of that.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean the way I look at it, and I'm also super grateful at the Advanced Wars by Web community, because they've been super welcoming. A lot of people have also joined Athena Crisis and given a lot of feedback. The way I look at it is that Advanced Wars by Web is this kind of pro tool for pro players, and so sometimes it's the UI is a bit hard to understand, and it's not entirely clear what all of the things do. So that's even confusing to me. So I think for matchmaking, I would like somebody to just succinctly describe, hey, here's exactly how this should work in Athena Crisis, and then I'm pretty sure we can get it in very quickly. For replays, I feel like we can do better than any other system. So the reason it's taking a bit longer is because I'm still ironing out what's the ideal system here. One idea is that obviously there will be in the game, you'll be able to just have a slider where you can go back and forth and play and just have the best possible experience, that it kind of feels like it's a video, but it's actually the actual game, where you can slide back and forth and see every action that happened. But then I'm also thinking of and I don't want to commit to any specific feature here right now, because some of them might not ship. So these are not forward-looking statements. It's more my goal is in general to build the best possible version of something, and that's overarching vision to just make the best possible version of Athena Crisis iteratively over time. And so for replays, another one could also be that you have this in-game replay system that is super good and does exactly what people want, but maybe you can also click a button and it downloads a video of your replay, right? So this sort of stuff is what's on my mind, and I just haven't gotten to iron out all of the details, but it will come.
all right, so it sounds like you're already thinking of a lot of these features. Let me
Yeah.
ask you an even more forward-looking question. If you could look into the future, not holding you to this, just open-ended question, what do you imagine the PvP scene looks like in a year? What do tournaments look like? What does gameplay look like? What does the scene look like? If you could design your ideal future.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, alive and happy and well, and people are having a good time, right? So I look at Athena Crisis not just as the PvP aspect. Obviously, that's a big piece, but I do want people to just be able to go into the game, get out get what they want out of the game, right? And that might be single player campaigns only. That might be campaigns with invasions. There might be something like co-op campaigns. That is something that I'm super interested in. Like invasions have a co-op element, but like there's no like true co-op yet. So that is something. And then for PvP specifically, as I said, I think I just want I'm hoping that the game will continue to grow in terms of user base, because the more people that come into the game, the longer the development will go on for, right? So that I think that's like a very easy statement to make. So if there is a critical mass of players, then the game will keep getting better all the time. And for tournaments, I think that we haven't even started thinking about that, right? So the first time we're gonna run a tournament, I would assume we're not gonna build anything into the game unless like basics that we might need. But if we are realizing, okay, this is the ideal tournament system for Athena Crisis, we can like build brackets, we can like build that system, we could build like similar to like soccer, like Champions League, we could like build a group stage and then like brackets or whatever people think is like the ideal system for like tournaments. And in general, yeah, I mean, replays, I already said that that's something I'm looking at. I don't think that will take a year. That's more of like weeks or like a small number of months away. Like I'm definitely hoping this year. Again, don't want to commit to it, so please don't hold me to it. I am working on all these things, but some of those things might take longer than others. And yeah, I just want to make sure that the game is well balanced. Also, as we add new content to the game continuously, that like makes it more fun for single player and PvP and invasions, of course, as well.
So one thing somebody asked, on a scale of Advance Wars to Wargroove, Advance Wars being Nintendo, you can't run a tournament without going through us if you're going to advertise it, right? Very, very strict IP control. To Wargroove, where, yeah, go ahead, run an independent tournament. We don't care. We're not going to do it. Where do you sit with like independent groups like a WBW or somebody's random Discord running an
Right.
Athena Crisis Discord and saying Athena Crisis tournament and saying, "Hey, we're running a tournament." Like
Yeah.
how do you feel
Right.
about that?
I mean, if, like if we're going to the war group side of things, where it's like, um, do whatever you want, and then thinking about like the spectrum of like Nintendo, like if people do whatever they want but they use the Athena Crisis brand in like a negative way, then that's definitely something where we would step in. I don't think that's what you were referring to, so it's hard to like place myself on like that spectrum. Personally, I think we should be involved, especially if they're like prizes, or some like merchandise that we could like give out, and also if we want to make changes to the game, right? But if people want to start running one where I'm not even aware of it, like that's a start. And I'm not specifically planning on like running tournaments myself, so I would prefer the community to get started on that and like make that happen, and then we kind of see how that evolves, right? So I think a lot of this is very flexible in terms of, let's see how the game is growing. Right now I feel like the numbers are like pretty healthy, like it keeps growing reasonably well. And so it depends on the growth, and it depends on kind of like what people want. I don't think it's likely within the next several months that like we would like start like an official tournament, but if there are community members that like would be open to organizing it, then we definitely want to be involved, and we'd be happy to promote it as well, depending on what the setup is.
Why is this game open source?
Yeah, good question. I've basically worked on open source software the entire time since I have been programming, and I started programming when I was like 12 years old. And so I owe a lot to open source. I learned a lot from open source. I contributed to open source a lot. It's what helped me get a job at Facebook. So I owe it a lot. And it's just fundamentally part of how I operate when I'm programming on a daily basis. And so, it's just so absolutely amazing that you can just go look at code that people write, use it, learn from it, make it better. And I thought when I'm starting a company, I'm kind of learning how to, be in the games industry, like figure out, do I like this more than like another industry? Yes or no? Figure out if there's certain things I can bring to the table, like, shipping updates really quickly, that is different from like almost all other games, but also figure out, what can I learn from game development that I wasn't aware of before. And so I thought, if I'm starting a company, getting into game dev, it's like a humbling experience to just like change industries like that, and like learn everything from scratch. So I thought I want to share all those learnings back with the community that's like following me already, right? So that's like one aspect. And so for me, it was like clear from the beginning, before I even like quit my job, to start a company, to become a game dev, that I would want to build all of what I'm doing in the open. So that's like one aspect, right? But then the other aspect is there's like, Athena Crisis, this experience, you can play it offline, but it's more fun online. It's more fun when you like join the community, when you're like trying to be part of it, when you're doing invasions, when you're playing PvP. And so some people then are worried, oh, what if the game server goes offline or something? What are we going to do, right? And the offline version will still work perfectly, but if the game is open source, that means it's like immortal, right? Like Athena Crisis will still be a game that exists 100 years from now, right? So in that way, I really care about archiving like video games and like being able to provide it to future generations, right? So I already know that the game is immortal because it's open source. Whatever happens, it's out there. And then the third aspect, and I think that is like actually the most critical ones, especially since you asked me about PvP, is that players can actually go in, they can look at all the balancing values like as they are today. They can do their own calculations. They can go in, they can find bugs, they can fix bugs, they can improve the game, they can contribute new code, new features, new skills, new units, like whatever they want, right? And so the way I look at Athena Crisis, that's, yes, it's something I created. And the code is out there for free for anyone to use to help improve Athena Crisis or learn from the code. But also it's under a permissive license. It's the MIT license. So they can actually take that code and make their own turn-based tactical game and put it on Steam or wherever they like. And I really care about just pushing this genre forward with like new ideas, new solutions, right? I think one thing I saw on your stream is that you were impressed, maybe, I'm not sure if that's the right word, that the AI is like better than Wargroove. It's definitely better than Advance Wars, right? And for me, this is the first time I built an AI, right? And I know it has a lot of like downsides. It can be even better, but within the time it takes, like 30 milliseconds that it has to generate every single action it takes in one turn. I don't think there's anything that's smarter in this genre that is as fast as this AI, right? And like, we could make it 10 times smarter and like maybe 20 times slower, I would still be fine. That's something I'm still actively interested in. If, people are listening to this and they are actually like, they know how to code, there's actually a competition on GitHub. If you want to build an AI smarter than the one that's in the game right now, then you can actually, we'll pay you for that as well. Because what I care about is that all of this is out in the open. People can improve Athena Crisis, build their own games, or build the best possible AI for 2D turn-based tactical games. So that's like just part of the values of Nakazawa Tech and part of my values. So that's why we're here.
Okay, there's a lot to unwrap here, but first, in an era like this is a big thing right now, where video game companies are taking flack for trying to take away ownership of games. They're trying to say people can't own their games anymore. You open source your code so that no matter what happens, people will always be able to have a copy of the game. More than that, you're helping people make games for free to continue the genre. You're going in the opposite direction of the entire gaming industry right now.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's a different approach, but I'm really trying to show that I care about this genre much more than just Athena Crisis, right? And at the same time, if that helps get more visibility to Athena Crisis and makes it, like there was one thing where one of the players like just recently contributed a feature to the map editor, right? And like that's just super valuable because everybody benefits from it. And then if somebody's like building a map editor for their game, they can just like look at that code and like also benefit from that. So just trying to be open about all the development, and like hoping that that's something that people like. But I think it's also super useful whenever I fix a bug and I'm like, hey, here's like the actual implementation of that fix, and then people can look at the hard truth in the code rather than whatever we talk about on Discord, right? So just being open about development, and I think it helps build a better community. And I don't think any other game in the genre does something like this. So always, especially for a game that like requires such intricate balance, I think there's absolutely no downside to doing all that. So yeah, I'm just excited to see if that code base can be useful. Like maybe not exactly this code, but like some people, I'm sure, can like pick certain algorithms for like their AI or like for their map editor or for like their basic behaviors. So yeah, that's all part of it.
Okay, I'm trying not to curse for the YouTube algorithm here. You are a proper bleeping hero. I will say that. Like, you're
I,
trying to give gamers more control of their games while other companies are trying to take them away. Like, thank you.
yeah, I mean, just to be fair, like, people cannot directly go in and like just change the main game and like affect everyone, right? Like those things have to be approved. But if people are like, okay, I'm gonna make my own version of Athena Crisis with my own art just for myself, like people can just go and do that in open source. Yes. And if they make their own version that's like not using any of the content from Athena Crisis, not any of the art from Athena Crisis, then they can just publish their own game as well if they want to. But yeah, so the way I look at it is that that's like a fair trade, because the main game should be a curated experience. It should be balanced, right? The PvP should work well. So I'm trying to be careful to make sure we get to the best possible point in that sense. But if people want to build their own game, with their own rules, be my guest. That's part of it. And then I think that the other thing that we haven't really touched on is that you can also buy Athena Crisis once and then play it on any device, right? So you can go on Steam or go on a website, you buy the game, you play on desktop, you can pick up the same campaign game on your phone or on your Steam Deck, wherever you are, and then you can go back and like continue playing on like desktop. And I think that's also like just trying to be super accessible for like PvP especially, but also, if you're just playing a single player campaign and you might just have 5 minutes, you're waiting at a bus stop or something, you can just jump in on your phone and play, then go home, continue playing on your desktop. So, just trying to meet players where they are and like hoping that they'll appreciate that.
I feel like someone needs to tag Asmongold on this. Wow. All right. I didn't expect that like a question about open source would be that awesome, but that was awesome. I am out of questions. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, in general, as we have discussed in this interview, we're trying to build the most open community in this genre. Like, we just discussed about how the game itself is open source, but I also want to make sure that we listen to feedback, we listen to ideas. Sometimes we implement a feature within like 10 minutes if the idea is good and it's not like too big of a feature. And if there are bugs or ideas of like, hey, this would make Athena Crisis like much better, we're always open to listen to that, because it's not just our game. Like, there's my vision and like the Nakazawa tech vision of what video games we're trying to build, and like having like what's in the game be also part of what people want to have in the game is like part of the vision, right? So the way I look at it is that you can only build great things collaboratively, and so that's one reason why we're taking this approach. So if you like to join a community where we're evolving the game really quickly every single day with like new features, new content, and you want to bring your own ideas to the table, and you just want to buy a game once, play it on any device, then I think this might be the right community for you.